Welcome to the Casting Forward podcast, brought to you by Clubmate, the all-in-one management platform for clubs and fisheries. We'll be talking all things fish and fishing with new guests every episode from the world of angling, including fishery managers to some of the best anglers in the country, finding out what they're up to, advice for your fishery, and thoughts on the future of the sport.
Hi guys, and welcome to the latest episode of the Casting Forward podcast with Clubmate. We've got something a little bit different for you today, and a fantastic guest I'm really looking forward to speaking to. We have got from the Environment Agency, Jamie Chapman, Fisheries Enforcement Officer, here to talk about his job day to day, talk about the Environment Agency and how he has an impact on fisheries and angling. So welcome, Jamie. Thanks for coming. It's really nice to see you.
Yeah, Rob. No, thanks for having us. Good to be on.
Yeah, brilliant. It's obviously a hot topic, and I'm sure you know that. And don't worry, we're not going to grill you or roast you over the coals today over anything. But anglers are really interested in kind of where their rod license money goes, and I think it's a great opportunity to speak to you. For awareness, we know each other quite well. Obviously, you're local to myself. You know, we've worked together over the last few years, and we are familiar with each other. But what we're going to talk about today is not only the Environment Agency as a whole, but your role as a fishery enforcement officer, what that means day to day, and hopefully also with your experience, offer some guidance to clubs and anglers on what they should do to improve fisheries enforcement. Let's start off a little bit about you, though. So this is your podcast, not just the Environment Agency, and you're certainly not just a badge. So give us a little bit of history on how you got where you are today. Like what's brought you to the Environment Agency, and how did you get there?
Okay, so going way back, well, not too far back, should I say, like most people, I got taught to fish when I was a kid by my dad. It was about 6 or 7 when I first started. Can remember, getting up early before school in the mornings, sticking the rods on my bike, going down a local lake, having a couple of hours. So I've always been in and around it. So I've got a background in angling. Lost that for a little bit when I left school, started to work. Towards my late 20s, I went back to college to train as a gamekeeper. So I had that countryside link there. Towards the end of that 2-year course, I was based up in the northeast doing this. We had a couple of lads from the Environment Agency come in looking for summer temps to survey salmon and trout up in the area. So electrofish, basically. I took a look at it. I thought, you know what, I quite like the idea of doing that during the summer. At the time, I was falling back on plastering. That was my trade. I thought, yeah, that's got to be a bit of a better summer job than, sweating and working hard during the summer. So, took them up on that. That ended in the October. Got invited back the next year, and kind of they kept us on during the winter then. So I was there for about a year and a half. Moved down to where I'm now, Peterborough way. Took another role up with the agency down here. On and off, it was all temporary work with the agency, temporary contracts. And part of the influence was my boss up in the northeast. He used to be a fisheries enforcement officer up there, and used to listen to some of his stories. And I thought, yeah, that's quite interesting. I wouldn't mind doing that. When I moved down here and started working out of Brampton, we managed to get out with the fisheries enforcement officer down there for a couple of days. Got on well with him. Thought, this is a decent job. I'd like to try and get this if I could. But they're like hen's teeth. It's such a good job, and it's done by people who have an angling background. You don't really leave it unless you have to, or you retire. So a couple of years later, a permanent role came up working navigation on the River Nene. Which I took, done that for a couple of years, and then, as if by magic, FEO role came up, Fisheries Enforcement Officer role came up in my local area, and I applied for it, and I've not looked back since.
Yeah, no, fantastic. So it's been a journey for you that started kind of with fishing in the outdoors. So it's obviously part of the passion, and I think it's sometimes something that I think anglers miss, and they miss out on, is realising that most FEOs, as you've said, most enforcement officers are doing it because they are anglers, because they've come from a fishing or an outdoor background. And certainly all the ones I've ever met are really passionate guys, regardless of the politics, they're really passionate about fisheries. And much like the rest of us, I might add, never get to go fishing very much either, because they're so passionate about the sport. They spend so much time invested in the sport. They don't get to fish much themselves. And it's nearly makes them, and I know you're paid for your job, and I know I am as well, but it nearly makes them some of the most passionate people in angling in the country, as much, if not more so, than some of the volunteers. So it's always great to hear from someone who, again, is so personally passionate about angling, has kind of taken that journey and really wanted to do it. So what was it, just to kind of touch on it again, what was it about kind of enforcement that attracted you so much? You just said that, like, I like the sound of that and the stories of this FEO. I'm assuming it wasn't, giving someone a good kicking. So what was it about that side of thing that really kind of appealed to you?
Like I said, it's the countryside aspect of it. It's putting back in and protecting the fish stocks. Just being out and about as well. You get to chat to loads of different people. You pick up different information on the banks, whether it's something's happening over here, something's happening over there, or just to see how people are catching, which gives you an idea of how the river's running. And it's just an interesting job. No day's the same, really. We work off intelligence, so it's one of those.
It is one of those fantastic jobs where it's always different. You've got reports coming from a really wide area. You could be anywhere across. What is your catchment, Jamie? Like, how big is your catchment?
So I'm pretty much South Links. So our team's Links and North Hants. We've got 3 full-time FEOs there. We've got one who covers North Links, I cover South Links, and one who covers Northamptonshire.
I mean, I know for a fact, obviously, that there's always an accusation, and again, we're not attacking you today on this, but we can't not be honest about it. There's always an accusation that the Environment Agency enforcement officers go for the easy bit. You're always going to these lakes and you're always checking tickets because they're all sat there and trapped in some lake somewhere. But from my experience, and I mean with you personally, but with other FEOs, myself for many, many years now, that's never the case. I've seen you patrolling miles and miles of river, in the middle of nowhere, and attending reports in the most out of the way isolated places. So what have you got to say about that kind of impression of what you do? Because obviously you can speak from a personal perspective, and it's not something that you do, because I know full well that you don't do that. But I've never seen it in general. I don't think it's true in general.
Yeah. No. Obviously, a big part of our job and your yearly numbers is license checking. Now, we'll know more anglers fish commercials than what I do rivers. It's easier to walk around the commercial and get them license numbers up than what it is to do rivers. However, I prefer to do rivers because at the end of the day, that's if there's any problems, they're going to be the most affected. But yeah, I mean, it isn't just about license checking. We've got a whole range of stuff we need to look at. Starting to put together case files for different reports which have come in. So we need to start off investigating them, and that's done in the exact same way as what the police do under Salmon Freshwater Fisheries Act. That's how we operate. While we're operating there, we have the same powers as a police constable. So whether that's on the hopefully slim chance of having to arrest somebody out in the bank, we can do. But investigating is exactly the same. We're bound by everything that the police are bound by. So, yeah, like I said, license checking is a part of it, but we've got case files we put together for prosecutions. It's a lot of witness statements as well we have to write if we issue offence tickets and the enforcement team decide to prosecute the angler. It all has to be written down in a statement from us, what happened. We've also got the keeping and introduction of fish, which we're starting to look at a lot more now, and that's to do with permitting for lakes and rivers, obviously, and basically what fish can go where and what's safe. What's a safe location for fish in terms of non-native invasive species and what damage they could do if they get out. So it is a really wide range, and there is a lot more than just license checking, like you say.
Yeah, I think it would be a key theme amongst the audience, without disparaging anybody, that a lot of people don't understand quite what's involved. I think a lot of people would describe, if you asked the audience today to describe a fishery enforcement officer, they would say that you check licenses and you chase poachers. and that's probably about the limit of what most people would say your job is. But as you've just described, there's many, many areas to that. There are facets to those things themselves, but also a lot of other roles and kind of responsibilities that they would never really think of, or certainly don't, are not at the forefront. Something I'm keen to explore from what you just said is the importance of why you check licenses, because I think the pushback on that would instantly be, and again, being honest with you and the audience, the pushback from that is it's just a tick box. Checking licenses just so people have paid. And I think it's important to explore, and I'd certainly be interested in your opinion. One, it is valuable that they've paid and the reasons why. And two, what more it means that you've got a license. To me personally, it's indicative that you've also got good quality standards. If you've bought a rod license, you're probably a better angler. You're probably thinking about fish welfare. It's an indicator, rather, it's not proof, but it's an indicator that you're probably a responsible angler. But what's your point of view on the importance of rod licensing and checking the rod license, Jamie?
So there's two sort of aspects I look at it from here. If an angler's got a rod license, which is by law, they need a license to catch a fish with a rod and line. That's the very first part of compliance. So they've got that first part. If they haven't got that, what else are they not complying with in terms of bylaws? And not also just for the rod license. If they haven't got a rod license, are they paying the club or the angling club their membership or day ticket? So the angling club's potentially missing out as well. Second point is all the rod license goes back into fisheries. So people who aren't paying aren't putting back in. And that license money, which comes to roughly, it fluctuates every year, but £22 million a year, all goes back into it. So we've got fish farm in Calverton, which supply 500,000 fish per year, which go out to stockings for rivers and lakes, all bred there. We've got the FIT projects, which is the Fisheries Improvement Funds, Fisheries Improvement Programme, and that's something which angling clubs can apply for to get money to improve their stretch of river or their lake, to encourage anglers to come into it. We've got the other part of our team, which is the fisheries technical guys. So I'm on the enforcement side. We've got another part of our team who do the technical side, and that's more about fisheries management. So they can go out and give advice. If there's any sort of fish kills, low DO, oxygen, pollution, anything like that, they can go out and assist with that and try and save what fish they can. So it all pays, it all comes back into angling. It all pays for that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's a key misunderstanding, or certainly it's a challenging point. And we discussed this before we started filming, Jamie, and we discuss it all the time. So many anglers on social media, it wouldn't matter what if the Environment Agency posted the winning lottery numbers, the first comment would be, "Why do I have to buy a rod license? And where does my money go?" Yeah, it's a challenging conversation. It's hard to convince people who won't be convinced, who don't want to be convinced. But for me, I'm really passionately a supporter of reinvesting in fishing, and that's without putting my iron in anyone's fire and voting for anyone at all. I'm very passionate about reinvesting in angling, and I think we're all responsible. Everyone that fishes is responsible for investing in that, and part of that is the rod license. And just to kind of shape it up for people, let's do a bit of pigeon maths on this. And I'm not going to go down to the pounds and pennies, but when you say that, the rod license income, so this is every single one of you in the audience that's bought a rod license, we're generating roughly 22 million a year. Now, you've already told us there's 3 FEOs in Links and Northants. There's also a fisheries technical team for Links and Northants. There's a team leader in Links and Northants. This is just in fisheries. Now, we're not going to tell everyone what your salary is. I'm not going to beg you to tell me how much you get paid. But if you add up just those members of staff, if we just add in those up, we're heading towards the large chunk of 500,000. And that's just to pay a decent living wage to the people that are helping you fish in Links and Northants, that are looking after your fisheries in Links and Northants. And then if you look at, that's already kind of 500,000 out of 22 million in one region. And then, as you mentioned, we're talking Calverton Fish Farm that produces, 500,000 fish per year. For fisheries around the UK. And then you look at the fish labs at Brampton, there are state-of-the-art fish labs at Brampton that investigate disease and all these kind of things. We're already probably several millions then at that point into where 22 million goes. And that's without any kind of habitat improvements, structural changes, groundwork, absolutely anything, monitoring stations, anything like that. that 20 million is nothing. That 20 million is a drop in the ocean of how much you could spend on fisheries. And I think you'd agree, Jamie, if you really wanted to, you could spend 20 million in every region.
You could easily. It is a small fraction of what goes back in. A lot of it is subsidised through different fundings, through working partnership. Obviously, we've got a lot of equipment to run. And when work is done, it's paying contractors as well. So sometimes it's not even us putting the price in for habitat improvement. It's what we have to have off contractors. So it is a really small amount which goes back into fisheries.
Yeah. So let's circle back a little bit back to Jamie Chapman. What is a day in the life of Jamie Chapman? And maybe not a day, what does a week look like? Because I think as you're probably a little bit office-based, a little bit on the bank. So what does a week look like in the life of Jamie Chapman?
I was going to say let's go for a week because my day varies so much. So a typical week would be trying to get away from a laptop as much as possible. So I'm out on the bank and I'm speaking to people. I'm patrolling my patch. I know what's going on. That can't always be helped. Like I mentioned before, I've got statements, I've got admin to do, training courses as well. Obviously, we need to be on the ball with what we're doing, whether that's walking the banks, checking licenses, keeping the training up so we can do boat patrols. We've also got surveillance capabilities, so we need to sort of keep on top of training with that. But yeah, I'd say as much as I can, I'm out and about. So I'd say 75% out on the bank, 25% admin. And, depends on what comes in as well. Obviously, we're not a blue light service, but we do have a reporting system, which is really, really important for us to work off. And it's really important for anglers to use. We're intelligence led. Like I said, there's only 3 of us in the whole of the Links and North Hants. I will go off set reports and patrol that area more often if them reports are coming in, and it gives us something to work off. It's justified that just because you report it and nothing happens, it doesn't mean it's not getting used. And we're actually using some reports at the minute from a year ago now, which came in, which at the time we couldn't use, but something's come up again, and we're looking at using them reports as evidence. So you've also got to think as well, if you do report something, you might not be the only one reporting it. I always say, if you report something on a Tuesday night at 8 o'clock, you don't have somebody who's reporting something on a Wednesday night at 8 o'clock and somebody else on a Thursday night at 8 o'clock. So Friday night at 8 o'clock, I'll quite happily try and rig up a patrol and be down there and see what's going on. That's how it works in intelligence. But yeah, sorry,
I've seen that firsthand, obviously, from you.
We've had it with your club, where we've had a few reports in, and we've managed to eventually track down the angler, and have been prosecuted. So it does work. It's a common misconception that you report something and nothing happens. And obviously, I'll give out the number of the 0800 80 70 60 number, which is the instant hotline to call. We've also just now got a online reporting tool, so you don't even have to call up. You can do it all online, same as what you do with the police. Put in a report, and all you have to do is type in "report illegal fishing in England" into Google, and it will come up with a .gov.uk website. And it's just a ticky box you go down of what you want to report, and it's really simple.
We might have to. It's really interesting because I know that we've probably spent several years, Jamie, chatting away and waiting for an online reporting system that's probably a little bit more automated than waiting for getting on the phone. Obviously, the phone side of things, although it's effective and always has been, is quite manual and slow and old-fashioned. And so we've been waiting for an online reporting feature for many years. And just to kind of come back cycling back to Clubmate, that's something we can promote in app. We can put links to that in our app to all of the anglers, so that they've got easy access to that. Now we might have to go a bit higher up the ladder and see if they're okay with it, but I can't see them having a problem with it. But if every club that we've got has got a button in their app to say report to the Environment Agency that links through to your form, I think we could probably effectively drive a lot of data for you there and hopefully solve some angling crime. Be part of the solution.
Yeah. Like I say, it's intelligence.
Now that's a key thing, really, isn't it? Being part of the solution. Yeah, that old statement, intelligence led is a really important word that I think few people really think about. It is being part of the solution and not the problem. Yeah, and it's not about instant response. As you said, you're not a blue light service. It's not like the police where you can come out, and even in the police, the resources are obviously limited. But the Environment Agency do not respond instantly to reports. It's intelligence led, so you build a picture. Yes, they will attend if possible at high, in high category incidents, but it can't always be instant. And like you said, don't always think you've not turned up to mine. And there is a certain, I suppose, selfishness to it. You didn't turn up to my phone call, but you're part of a bigger picture of creating a heat map of where the problem areas are, which can target you to be more effective.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with the telephone reporting, people just need to bear in mind a little bit that it's similar to how the police work. The people on the end of the telephone aren't the fisheries enforcement officers. They're taking the reports, and they don't only do the Environment Agency, they do the whole of DEFRA. So they've got limited training on fisheries, but they also get limited training on everything else they need to know about. So it's a broad sort of spectrum that they have to have knowledge of, but not subject matter experts. So when they take it, they'll ask the questions that have been set to ask, and it will then get filtered down to the relevant area and the relevant person. Obviously, in our case, it will be fisheries enforcement officers, and we'll be able to assess it a lot better.
Yeah, so it tends to obviously go to
potentially, if we need to, we can call back.
Yeah, so it goes to the duty officer usually, doesn't it? It goes to the on-duty FEO for the area.
Yeah, it does.
And then obviously they choose to kind of prioritise that a little bit more. And again, that's really important. Don't be put off by the fact at the end of the day you are speaking to a reporting line that doesn't have intimate knowledge of what you're talking about. They've got a set of questions. Answer them all as honestly as you can and in as much detail as you can. But don't be put off or don't expect them to have all the answers, because if it is important, you will get a call back or you'll get contact from the FEO, the duty officer on it.
Yeah, definitely. And what we're looking for is quality over quantity. So if you can identify anybody, give it identifying features, how many people there are, what's going on, that's what we're looking for, so we can establish, is it illegal, rather than using tracksuit bottoms and he looks a bit iffy. That doesn't really give us a lot to go off.
You've got to have an actual crime there somewhere, haven't you?
You have, yes.
And bad fashion, fashion. I know there are crimes against fashion, but I don't think they're warranted under SAFA, to be honest. This is something I really want to explore with you a bit more in depth, and I want you to speak not only from your own perspective, but from the perspective as a voice of the Environment Agency. And again, no guns to your head on this, but clearing up some of the kind of common mistakes or misconceptions or questions from anglers on what actually constitutes a fisheries offence, and what is the difference between kind of a rule breaking and a fisheries offence. So I'm going to let you lead on this, because I guarantee you'll already know a lot of the ones I would poke out there for you. But if you want to kind of just give us a little sprinkle of the things that you get mixed up the most often, or give us a few of the real hot ones that one are important that don't get reported, or two that do get reported and you say that's not actually a fisheries crime.
Yes, so obviously under SAFA, Salmon and Freshwater Fisheries Act, the biggest one we deal with is licences, fishing without a rod licence. So that's something we do, that's something we check for. Also, using instruments which they shouldn't be using, or unlicensed instruments, you'll say, so your crayfish traps. They can be licensed for a permit. It's free to apply for. However, we find a lot of crayfish traps which aren't licensed. And again, if they're not licensed, there's a good chance that they're not sticking within the dimensions that a crayfish trap needs to be, which opens it up for not only crayfish, but fish, other protected species, birds to get caught into and die. And we have found that. And that's the same with netting as well. Nets, if they're licensed and they're used for fisheries, potentially somebody wants to crop a lake for fisheries management, it needs to have a permit. Obviously, gill nets, seine nets across a river and left for a couple of days, that isn't going to ever be permitted, and that's what we're looking out for. A lot of stuff which does get mixed up is the bylaws. So you get your national bylaws, which obviously cover nationally. That includes your closed seasons for coarse fish, for you. Maybe not salmon and trout, because they fall under local bylaws, so you have to check them. But some which get mixed up with them are your 3 metre rule for fishing with more than one rod. and rods being left unattended. So within bylaws, if you fish with more than one rod, the butts of the rods can't be more than 3 metres apart from the outer to outer. So you can have them in a T shape as long as the outer two rods are within 3 metres. That gets confused with rods being left unattended if somebody's away from that rod more than 3 metres. The unattended rule is if you can't get to that rod immediately when you've got a bite. So the good example we use is if you're too far away, if you're halfway around a lake and I come along and there's a rod there, I'll pull the line, set the buzzer off. If nobody appears, it's unattended. If it's baited up and it's hooked in the water, it's unattended. You're not going to react to it. So you've got more chance of the fish getting deep hooked or taking it round and getting caught up in reeds or anything like that. So all of the bylaws are there to protect fish stocks at the end of the day. What has happened in the past as well, not just people who aren't with their rods, but people in bivvies. I believe it was in a different area where NFEOs turned up, bivvy set up, rods in the water, hello, no response, pulled on the rods, no response. The angler's flat out asleep. Don't know whether he's had a few tinnies or not, but he's not responding to them rods going off. And that's the same as an unattended rod. If you're not reacting to your bait getting picked up in the water, it's going to cause damage to the fish. A bit of confusion where it comes to theft of fish and theft of fishing rights. So we don't deal with that. That goes over to the police. There is a big difference. If it's within a lake, within a still water, them fish belong to somebody. So it's no different than somebody coming into your garden and taking your bicycle out of your garden. So if you're taking fish out of a lake, that is Section 1 of the Theft Act. That is a police matter. We don't deal with it, unfortunately. If it's on a river, obviously river fish are classed as wild, so they don't belong to anybody. However, normally there's fishing rights to a club. So that would be under Schedule 1, Paragraph 2 of the Theft Act, which essentially is theft of fishing rights. So you're taking them fishing rights away from that club because you're breaking their rules. Again, falls under theft, so it's a police matter. But we do try and work with the police when we've got cases that come in like that.
This is a really, really important one, personal one to me that I've done an awful lot on, and obviously know really well. There's a real misuse of the word poaching. Anglers use this kind of generic term poaching, and they don't really know what the word means. They know what they think they mean by it, but obviously there are two offences here, as you've just clarified, and I'll just kind of go over it again for the kind of benefit of the audience. There is theft, and there is theft of fishing rights. There's theft of fish, theft of fishing rights. Now, in an enclosed water, and there are a few tiny grey areas on this, but to make it kind of quite black and white for people, there is theft of fish in an enclosed water, and that is your owned stock. So you own the fish in an enclosed water, say a carp fishery. You own the fish. So if someone takes your fish, they're stealing the fish, it's theft. On a river, you cannot steal fish because they're not classified as owned. They're known as wild animals free to roam. So whether you've got the fishing rights or not, you don't own the fish. So someone who takes the fish out of your river is not committing theft of fish. They're committing a theft of fishing rights. And the way that they are committing that theft of fishing rights is that they are in breach of your rules. Essentially, most clubs, as we all know, I'll speak in general, some don't, but most clubs will say you cannot take fish from our water as a rule of the club. So if you've become a member or you've got a ticket, obviously you've consented to those rules. If you breach that rule by taking fish against the rules, and it's the same as any other rule, if the rule says don't stand on your head and you break that, you're committing theft of fishing rights because you've invalidated your right to fish. But both of those, whether it's theft of fishing rights or theft of fish, are a police offence and not an Environment Agency offence, which is, again, that's something that the audience confuses quite a lot. And one I really, really want to drive home to clubs and anglers, every angler, to be honest, if there is a theft offence, whether it's theft of fish or theft of fishing rights, you call the police on 999. It isn't a 101 offence because it's a crime in progress. If someone is there actively fishing when they shouldn't be or taking fish when they shouldn't be, you report it to the police on 999, not 101. Don't deprioritise it because you think fish aren't important. The police will do that priority for you, I promise you. But if there's a crime in progress, whether it's theft of fishing rights or you're witnessing a murder, you ring 999, report the offence to the police, and they will prioritise whether they come out for it. But at least make sure you ring the right people to start with and not the Environment Agency for that offence.
Yeah, a good one to mention on that is it may change in different areas, but certainly in this patch is op traverse is the code name for theft of fish or theft of fishing rights, which the police will work under. So again, when you speak to that operator, they should be able to, if they don't know what it is, they should be able to find out what op traverse is and realise that it's theft of fishing rights or theft of fish, and they should be able to put it to the right, should we say, police constables, maybe the Rural Crime Action Team, if they've got one, or anybody who's available at the time.
Obviously, you guys collaborate with the RCAT teams, the rural crime teams, with the police, if possible and where possible, and there's some good relationships there. I'd also recommend always, and probably speak to your local Environment Agency officer like Jamie, get to know your RCAT team. And people like Jamie, if you ring your FEO, he'll probably have contacts and knowledge of your local rural crime team. So if you're a club that really wants to drive this forward, ask your local Environment Agency officer who the RCAT guys are and see if you can arrange a meeting, because the better the relationship you have, the more they'll trust you, the more they'll listen to you and and come out and help you out there. So it's really key for clubs and anglers to kind of build those relationships. So make sure you kind of get in touch and speak to the RCAT team. But it is really important that you report to the right people, Jamie, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I believe, as well as the RCAT team, they're trying to get local wildlife crime officers within different areas now. So it might not be solely for RCAT, but they'll have some idea of wildlife crime. So fishing obviously goes hand in hand with that. We patrol. We try to patrol as much as we can with the police. Show a presence on the bank. We also do patrols with club bailiffs, volunteer bailiff service, which is part of the Angling Trust, and we cross-border work as well with different colleagues. So we try and get out and around as much people as we can, and obviously it's part of education. While we're working with the police, who may not be up on fisheries offences, we can sort of let them know what to look out for.
I was going to say, revisiting that Operation Traverse conversation, it's a great initiative that's educated police forces around the country on kind of angling crime and how to respond to angling crime. But there is also a case. Remember, the police have turnover the same as the rest of us. Times change, people change, clubs change. So keep reminding them and get that relationship going, because sometimes you'll quote Operation Traverse, and I've done this personally, and they won't have a clue what you're talking about, because you imagine how many operations the police have got. It's not just fishing, but there's Operation A to Z at the police. They're not always going to know what an Operation Traverse is. So get those conversations, and this is something, and it doesn't just apply to enforcement. It applies to probably in many ways to everything in angling, but fisheries management. People talk about fishery management when the fish are already dead. The fishery management, oxygen testing starts when the fish have gone belly up. They go, oh, we better get an oxygen meter to check how much oxygen killed the fish. The same with enforcement. Don't just think about enforcement when someone's killing your fish. In the downtime, in the good times, get in touch with your RCAT team, get in touch with your FEO like Jamie, ring your local team leader, set up a meeting and build those relationships in the good times. So when the bad times come, they're already there for you, and that you're not responding kind of after the fact.
Yeah, definitely. It's just building up them relationships with the different agencies. And, I've got a lot of fisheries now where I can go on and, if they're having problems, I can try and sort them out. I can try and help out and patrol that area a bit more. But again, it falls back to getting reported. If we don't know about it, we can't act on it.
If you don't report it, it didn't happen, as was famously said. It's one that Paul Thomas pushes all the time. If you don't report it, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And it's true. No matter how loud you shout and how many times you post it on Facebook, if you don't report it, open brackets, by the right method, close brackets, it didn't happen. And when you say, and you see this all the time, Jamie, in 6 months' time, someone posts on Facebook, I saw so-and-so steal such and such, and you're like, well, did you report it, mate? He goes, no. Oh, sorry, I didn't have my crystal ball out. Mystic Meg's not with us anymore. Yeah. I couldn't quite attend that one.
Yeah. So we had the conversation out with two anglers, little bit iffy. One was a bit reluctant to give details because he thought he didn't have a licence. Managed to calm him down and said, let's check the system. If you think you haven't got one, his license was in date. It was fine. And then, so obviously when we think there's a potential offence, the body worn video goes on for evidence. So we turned that off. That's fine. Not an offence. Both of them had licences. As soon as the body worn video went off, the other one starts piping up a little bit. Where were you when all the fish were getting nicked? Well, hang on. When was this? Oh, it was about 3 years ago. Well, we only started a year and a half ago. This is going back a year now. Oh yeah, but they're still doing it. It's still on there. So okay, well, obviously there's a problem. Have you reported it? No. I haven't reported it. Okay, can we ask why? I'm not a grass. And we're like, hang on, you can't complain and then not report. It doesn't make sense. But yeah, that was a conversation we've had, and it baffles us as to you have a lot of complaints of you're not doing this, you're not doing that, and yet obviously within the area, if there are any reports, they all come through to the local FEO. So I know about it, or I don't know about it because they're not being reported.
Now, there's some great, and I know a lot of them around here, Jamie, and in your patch, but there's some great anglers, there's some great clubs, and there's some great volunteers. But there are nowhere near as many reports as there are crimes, and there are probably nowhere near as many reports as people think there are. Compared to the amount of posts on Facebook, the amount of reports is minimal. Yeah. And if you don't know it's happening, you can't guess. It's not going to happen. And what a conversation! What a society we live in. I'm not a grass because I won't report that someone is killing animals. Someone's killing animals, and if you're taking the welfare out of it, I'm paying in this sport, but I won't report the people that aren't, and then I wonder why the sport's deteriorating. What an attitude! What a society we live in.
Yeah, exactly, and then complain to the officer that you're not reporting it to. Makes you think a little bit, doesn't it?
It's a head scratcher, mate. I'm fairly sure that a portion of your salary is danger money for having to deal with some of these people sometimes. But it can be challenging. As with any part of society, when you're managing people, when you're dealing with the public, and especially when people are paying towards something, there's a huge level of expectation, and sometimes it's not matched by input. It's not matched by their own input into it, and it can be challenging. But obviously, the good days reward that. Obviously, the passion for the sport. You've got a passion for angling yourself. So let's talk about your fishing again. Let's take it a little bit off the kind of the depressing topics and go back to you and your fishing. Do you get to go fishing very often? And I already know the answer will be no because we work in the sport of angling. But
the lack of fishing. So I'm in a role where I know where there's some really nice rivers, some really nice still waters. Fish are getting caught, but I don't nearly get enough time to go fishing. Obviously, within
I suppose when the bailiffs are out as well, so you don't have to pay either, do you?
You never see a bailiff on the bank. So no, that's something which gets said to me.
Nah, never had my license checked.
Yeah, that's it. I have that conversation at least twice a week. And I have to say to
you usually whilst having your license checked, which is quite funny.
Yeah, I usually have to, I usually say to them, a lot of it is by chance. If you pack up half hour before I turn up and check that stretch of river, or I'm there 10 minutes before you get there, I'm not going to see you, am I? And, if people really want their license checking, they could give us a call, let us know where they're going to be, and if I'm in the area, I'll try and check it. But it's pointless because you're not going to ring up if you've not got a license, are you?
I'm going to say it's so angling specific, though, Jamie. Again, this weird kind of fishing thing that we've done to ourselves. Now we've all got a driving license, right? Now I don't drive around expecting my driving license to be checked. I don't carry it with me, and I don't cry. I've never run to the transport police and said, "You've not checked my driving license." I don't get why there's this kind of expectation when it comes to a rod license that it must be checked to prove its value. It's not bought so that someone can prove you bought one. It's bought to reinvest in your own sport and for the welfare of fishing. And I don't get if you put this to people, you always get the similar kind of light bulb moment. No, my driving license doesn't get checked every day. So why do I expect this bit of paper here to be checked? So, have you ever thought about it that way? Because I think about it that way all the time.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of that's another analogy used with your driving license. You've hit it spot on there. You don't go around producing it every day. But I think it's lack of staff being on the bank, or lack of FEOs being on the bank, shall we say, that people see or don't see, and then. There's a lot of pressures on the waters, and it's an easy route to say, well, I've had my license checked for X amount of years. Or the other one I see is, there's an Environment Agency office 50, 100 metres away from the river, and this is happening. People just got to bear in mind that there's a very small amount of fisheries enforcement officers. Not everybody in the Environment Agency is fisheries, and only FEOs can check licences. So they may be fully kitted out in EA gear, but they're probably doing another job.
Yeah, let's make it really clear for the audience. It's a warranted job. You have to be warranted to check those licenses. It's not just because you've got an EA badge on. It's like someone in Tesco being the security guard. You've got to be warranted. You've got to be qualified to deal in security, obviously. But even more importantly, when it comes to fisheries enforcement, you've got to have a warrant to do that. And I think that's something that people misunderstand again. They'll see not just the office, but they'll see the guys out on the bank. They're repairing a lock or something and because they got the badge, they're in for it from these anglers. If you see an EA badge or an EA truck or whatever else. But you would be, not you because you are warranted, but an Environment Agency officer would be in breach of the law if they checked for a rod license without a warrant.
Yeah, so under what we work under, Salmon and Freshwater Fisheries Act, only in old money a water bailiff appointed by the EA, which is Fisheries Enforcement Officer now, or a police constable can on demand check a licence. What we advise clubs, and we've done it recently again, if you have it in your rules that when a bailiff comes round, you need to prove you've got a rod licence. If you can't prove a rod licence, a bailiff can ask you to leave. So legally, an angler doesn't have to show the rod licence. However, they could be asked to leave and potentially banned. Because I'd imagine if an angler has a rod licence and is refusing to show it just for that, you're not going to want them fishing on your waters anyway.
They're not a very nice person anyway. So let's we've done kind of Environment Agency misconceptions. Let's do a little bit of kind of club misconceptions because this is one that obviously creates a bit of friction between anglers and clubs all the time. No, a club cannot demand to see your rod license because they're not warranted. A club bailiff, and I bailiff myself, I'm obviously a chairman, but I do bailiffing on the bank. I cannot come up to you fishing and demand that you show me a rod license. But as you've well said, if it's in the rules of my club that says you must have a rod license to fish, I can ask you to prove that. And if you can't prove that, we can ask you to leave. And if you refuse to do so, we're back to the theft offence. We're back to the theft of fishing rights offence. And then it's the police. And like you say, there are consequences there. And it's indicative, like you said earlier, if you don't have a rod license, have you got car insurance? Is your car taxed? Have you committed another offence? Are you wanted for another offence? And I know that sounds like a bit of a leap, but this is speaking from experience. I've seen it. I've seen people that you have no rod license and then the car's not insured and, and it's indicative. And quite often drugs, Jamie, even as serious as drug offences, the car's actually full of drugs. There've been some really big busts on anglers who are sat, anglers having a fish while he waits for a drug deal. And I've seen knives, powder, all sorts of stuff, and it sounds unbelievable. It sounds a bit far fetched, but you've probably seen a million things, Jamie. I bet you've seen a few rare things in your time.
Yeah, it's similar to what you're saying there. You generally find when somebody goes from 0 to 11 on the anger scale over something really minor, something in the back of your head starts going, "What else is it?" Because this is such a minor, a bylaw offence where you're possibly going to end up with a warning letter saying don't do it again if it's your first fisheries offence. But they've all of a sudden taken it from, like I say, 0 to 11. You start thinking, well, what else is there? What's in the car? Why are they so eager to get away? And yeah, it can be a cover as well sometimes for what they're not wanting to be spoken to about. Yeah, and that's part of the reason why when you see us on the bank, we are dressed up in stab vest, baton and cuffs, because we don't know who we're speaking to. We haven't got direct access to police national computer checks. We can do it, but we haven't got direct access to it. So we can only check the rod license and check an address check going off their identification. If they're wanted or anything like that, we won't know about it. So that's why part of the reason we're dressed as we are is for that reason. It's PPE, personal protective equipment. It's there to help us stop getting injured. Same as wearing a hard hat on site. The other reason is a lot of places where people fish, lakes or rivers, they're quite isolated, and pretty much every angler has something stabby or sharp, don't they? Stabby or cutty. So that's the reason why we dress as we are.
Yeah. It's people sometimes think it's a bit ridiculous wearing kind of stab vests and things like that. But obviously, we've done it as club bailiffs. I go out, if we go out in patrols in the dark or at night time as club bailiffs, we wear stab vests. And people say, God, you look ridiculous. What a waste. Nothing ever happens. But, I personally have been threatened with a hunting knife. I ain't talking a pocket knife. I'm talking a 2-foot hunting knife. Someone ran at me with a hunting knife when I was out on patrol because we'd caught him without a license and he was committing an offence by killing eels. He didn't like being caught and he was guilty of a variety of other things. So he ran at me with a hunting knife, and thankfully I had a stab-proof vest on. He thankfully also he never got that close because I got put it this way, I didn't let him. But that's the kind of thing you face, and people don't take it. Yeah, people don't take it seriously, and it really is serious. And like you said, it's the associated offences. And the example I was going to give a few minutes ago. We caught an angler a few years ago, and he had no license. He had no permission to fish. He was fishing where he shouldn't. But these are minor offences, as you know, Jamie. If you're lucky, you get a warning and maybe a community restitution, or you pay 50 quid. But it turns out the reason he was he was aggressive with our bailiffs, and the reason he was so shy and so coy is because he was actually already guilty and wanted for battery and domestic violence offences. And his family were there with him. And upon investigation, he was still wanted for offences. And it turned out he was quite a serious offender. And it was actually the result of this investigation that led to him being kind of prosecuted further and thankfully, hopefully improving someone else's life, or potentially saving someone else's life. And I'm not saying we're taking credit for any of that, but that's why you've got to be aware of what you might be facing that isn't just doing a bit of fishing.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like I said before, it's getting these reports in. Obviously, tip of the iceberg, and it was a bit of a smoke screen as to why they don't want to be spoken to. And like I said before, you don't know who you're dealing with. Somebody, like you say, could be wanted. They could be out on bail, getting a summary offence for fishing, could put them back inside. You don't know.
So let's lighten the load a little bit again. Go back to your fishing. So what is the fishing that kind of what's the fishing that does it for you? What is your area of fishing, and what do you do the most? And give us a little bit. Give us a story.
So for me, it's got to be pike, predator fishing, or silvers. Do a little bit of carp fishing every now and again, but I'm not. I've got to be doing something. I've got to be having something done, moving around all the time. So sitting for a few days and maybe getting a couple of bites, going for carp isn't my sort of thing. But I'm yet to get out enough on local waters or waters that are patrol to sort of have any kind of good results for pike yet. So that's something for me to do in the future. Once I get a bit of
I heard
time.
they taste really good as well.
I wouldn't know. I don't think I'd want to taste them. Only apparently.
Oh, there's some good pike in our area and some massive perch. You know where? No, yeah. Disclaimer, guys, we're not talking about England, but if you were, around our area, Jamie, there's some great pike fishing, and I mean pike in the rivers into the 20-pounders and even 30-pounders, and close to where you said you were patrolling the other day over at Crowland, there's massive perch. We're talking £3 plus in the river there. So it's well worth getting yourself out when you get the chance. It's well worth it. Well worth a go. So, have you ever been abroad? Have you ever fished outside of England? Have you ever done the French thing or fished overseas or anything like that?
I haven't fished. I haven't done France this year though. Family holiday. We went out to can't remember what it is now. Tenerife. Went out to Tenerife, and they done boat trips. So we went out on a little 4-hour boat trip. I got a lumberjack, I think it was called, similar to a tuna sort of thing. But that's been about the only sort of fishing I've done outside of the UK. Again, it's having time and different interests. Family as well, yourself takes up time. So it all goes on the back until you get a bit of time to go out.
Only 24 hours in a day, mate. And obviously, once you start adding in kind of, if you have got a family, and especially if you've got kids, and then once you add in kind of a passion for your job, when you do have a passion for your job, even if you think about it in 8-hour increments, you've got 8 hours for the family, 8 hours for your job, and 8 hours sleep. Like that's your day gone, isn't it? There ain't much room there to go fishing.
Yeah, and what I usually find is you end up getting down a rabbit hole, certainly with case files and investigations, where I put aside a couple of hours and all of a sudden it's like 4 hours later and everything else gets pushed back. But I'm quite lucky in the fact that my kids like to go fishing as well, so it gives me an excuse to get out with them, or gives me an excuse to get out fishing, and they like to come out as well.
So, have you got any kind of going back to the kind of passion for the job and things like that? Have you got any passion for progression? Are you looking to go further than you are now? Is there a passion for moving up the ladder, managing regionally or nationally at any level?
For me, not at the minute, to be honest. I've been doing this coming up nearly 3 years now. There's still a lot of things I'm getting my head around. A lot of things that are coming up in the future, which I'm looking forward to doing in this role. And I think I said before, I prefer to be out and about rather than behind a sort of laptop pushing data or doing whatever. I'm quite happy doing what I'm doing and keeping my patch as it is, sort of thing. So getting to know the fishing clubs, getting to know the people.
I hope so, because I think you're brilliant at what you do. So I don't want you to go anywhere at all. But
nah, thanks.
So I'll ask you a couple as a set of eyes and ears on the bank. I'll ask you a couple of opinion pieces. One, do you think fisheries enforcement or fisheries crime is on the increase or the decrease? And two, when it comes to the amount of people fishing, obviously there's always this big argument about, angling being in decline and an impression that angling's an old-fashioned sport and it's in decline. Do you think we've got more or less people fishing? And do you think your job, your kind of fisheries enforcement, is getting easier or harder, or more crime, less crime?
So in terms of the crime side, I'm asked this quite a bit when I'm out, and have you caught anyone lately? What's it like, sort of thing. There is no set pattern to going out and catching somebody doing something they shouldn't be doing. September was quite a busy time for me. I think I had about 11 or 12 offence tickets within a week. It was over summer term, but none of them were juniors. So you sort of look at it and go, well, that doesn't make sense if they're not juniors. I could go like a couple of weeks without issuing any tickets. I could walk onto a fishery one day, issue 5 tickets, walk onto the same fishery the following week and not issue any tickets at all, or vice versa. And it's similar to riverbanks. Sunday, all river checks, 30 licenses and 1 ticket. So there isn't a set pattern. At the minute, I'm still quite early in the career, so still second, coming into third season of actually doing the role. So to see any patterns, if there's any difference between summer and winter, holidays, non-holidays, still not sort of showing at the minute. But in terms of anglers getting out and about, there is a lot of the older generation still fishing, which is good. So obviously, you sort of expect that. They've done it all their lives. You're starting to get the younger generation come up as well now, which is good. And I think I've spoken to a few juniors, and it's good that they're out fishing. They're not stuck inside. They're not on the games consoles or anything, and they're sort of out and learning. And when I'm out, I can give them a bit of advice, a bit of fish welfare. A few of them maybe haven't got unhooking mats or landing nets, and you can sort of say to them, maybe next time save up for that. And I've come up with a little leaflet which I've knocked up just for the very basics of what you need to fish. It explains the license, it explains permission from the owners, and on there it's got a bit about fish welfare, the minimum of what they should carry as good practice, and about where the word license money goes. So I tend to give that to sort of the junior anglers, the ones who are just coming up, just to give them a bit of an idea of what they need to look out for.
No, it's great to hear. It's nice to hear that you see, so much, or certainly enough at both ends of the spectrum. You've still got these older generations fishing, which obviously they've been doing it all their life. We want them to carry on doing it for as long as possible. But it's really interesting and really good to hear that you're seeing a noticeable difference in kind of kids coming through. It's something that's key to what we do at Clubmate. Obviously, it's a lot of what we do at Peterborough, and it's key to the sport. It's key to the sport of angling. If sheer numbers, if we have no anglers coming through, we will have no adult anglers in the future, no committee members, no club members, no enforcement guys. We've got to have anglers to have everything else. And And obviously, as part of the podcast, it's called Casting Forward. A lot of it's about the future. So we talk about the kind of future of the sport, and juniors are a key part of that. There's a lot of projects going on, Jamie, which being in the part of the kind of fisheries kind of part, an angling sport, you'll be aware of. You've got the Get Fishing scheme, the Let's Fish scheme, obviously School of Fish over in Peterborough, loads of different community groups and charities. It's nice to hear that it looks like we're winning that fight. We're starting to see them then materialise as, say, proper anglers, inverted commas, proper anglers, but they're going fishing themselves. So do you think that's a result of some of the stuff that's going on around the country, or do you just think they've just rediscovered it again? It's becoming more fashionable. Any ideas? And again, it's just an opinion. Don't worry, I'm not going to hold you to it. But why do you think you're seeing more kids?
No, I mean, certainly Spalding Way, where I cover, I've seen kids where I've attended the your events with Peterborough District, where they've been shown by your bailiffs how to fish, and then a couple of weeks later I've met them out on the bank again. So that is a direct result of that, I'd say. And yeah, I honestly don't know. Younger generation getting into it, it could just be that full turnaround of parents being sick of them stuck inside on game consoles, if that's what's happening, and trying to encourage them to get out. I'd like to think it's because they want to learn about nature as well when they're out. They want to go out and catch the fish and gives them something to do. Obviously, a lot of them are in sort of 2s, 3s, 4s, little groups sort of thing. So it's going out with mates and seeing what they can get. And as I always say, whenever you're outside, countryside, whatever you're doing, it's not necessarily all about, if you're fishing, it's not necessarily all about catching the fish. It's what you see at the time. You get a kingfisher fly across you, you see bird life, anything like that. That can make up for blanking, which quite often
we tell ourselves that anyway, Jamie.
We've
all gone home and said that.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's absolutely true. I've done a lot of these podcasts, and no matter who the guest, doesn't matter what background they come from, what part of the sport they come from, there's a trend across every single one of them that they'll say it's more than about just fishing. It's about being part of the environment, part of nature, part of the community. You get to see wildlife, and it can't be not true. You can't have that many people saying something that isn't true, and it's something I think we need to kind of get people outside of the sport to recognise, because I think also one of the key issues in angling and one of the key solutions is that we're too insular. Anglers like talking to anglers, and they only talk to anglers. And I mean, not just individuals, but clubs only talk to anglers. You only talk to anglers. We've got to show that wider society that fishing is a great way to celebrate the environment and your local community and all of the above, I think. And I don't know if you've kind of seen that. It sounds like it's kind of the way you would see it as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, anglers are like one of the biggest parts of being eyes and ears out on a bank. You think of being out there all the time. If there's any pollution going on, what we're looking for, illegal fishing, 9 times out of 10 they're going to be the ones who are spotting it. And it's also obviously great for mental health as well at the minute. Not say just at the minute, but it's getting a lot more use out of helping people with mental health issues to go out and be outside, be within nature, and sort of chill out a little bit on the bank.
Yeah, I think when you say just at the minute, it's more kind of it's now become recognised. It's become recognised that, and well, I think everyone's always known it. Everyone that goes fishing feels good. Everyone goes fishing feels relaxed. Whether it's dopamine response or whatever, but it's now recognised in a very kind of more technical and evidence manner that fishing is beneficial to mental health and well-being. And is a key part, prescribed activity for that. And it's really important. We're in a world where mental health is, a bigger problem than it ever has been, or certainly more recognised. We recognise the problem more than we ever have. The world maybe is more stressful. I don't want to kind of speak ill of what it used to be like. I don't think, life's always hard, but, we've got a lot of pressure. People have got less money, less time, busier jobs. The world's a scary place. And if something like angling can kind of take even a little bit of that away, it's really important that we drive that, that we drive the future of the sport. And that's from the beginning of your job to the end of your job is a part of helping that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, again, you hit the nail on the head there. Anglers have known angling's been good for your mental health. But if we only speak to anglers and keep it within the angling circle. It's maybe part of the reason why it's only just getting out there now, that actually, try and encourage more people to use it for mental health issues.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk the future then. Let's go on to the future. I like to do a 2-part future crystal ball when we do these podcasts. I don't want you to give away any secrets because I don't want you to get sacked or anything like that. But what's the future holding for fisheries enforcement from your perspective, without speaking too much for the higher ups or anything like that? What's the future of fisheries enforcement, and then what does the future look like for Jamie Chapman, whether it's next year or what's the future look like?
Well, for fisheries enforcement, I've actually been speaking about this recently. The thing with the fishing licenses, where you used to be able to get direct debit, they're bringing that back in, or they're looking to bring that back in, so you can have a repeat instead of having to go on every year and buy your license separately. I don't know too much about that, but that's been mentioned. So I suppose it is just the old direct debit which is coming back in. We're definitely concentrating, or we're going to be looking to concentrate a bit more on keeping an introduction of fish. This is the 2015 Act, which come in 2015 regulation, sorry, which come in, and it's to do with what fish can go where. So, in terms of if you have a fishery, it's simple answer, simple sort of little explanation. If you have a still waters as a fishery, it has to be registered with CFAS, which is a fish health inspector. From there, you then have to get your permits to stock it from the Environment Agency. Now, it's either stocking or cropping that you still need a permit for, or if you're going to keep non-native invasive species, for instance, catfish. So we are going to be concentrating more on getting fisheries in line with that and getting them compliant. So that's coming in the future. That also covers what used to be under SAFA, where movement of fish, illegal movement of fish from one water body to another. So within that, I mentioned before, we've got surveillance capabilities. So we've got a surveillance hub where we can go out and set up surveillance for that specific activity if it's happening and if it's becoming a problem. So with that would lead to what we're going to look at doing more as well, on top of not just the checking the rod licenses, which is the sort of basics of what we do and make sure people have rod licenses, but we're going to be looking at the more complex cases where we have to put case files together. And it's, like I said before, it's going to be the exact same as a police. You have a case file from start to finish, and then you present it to a enforcement governing body who will decide what the outcome will be. So it's getting a bit more technical.
So it's
getting a lot more technical.
I was going to say let's explore that a little bit more for the audience again, and this is more about education than it is about kind of upsetting anybody. Fish movement and kind of the movement of fish and stocking and cropping. There are misconceptions there as well, and also kind of another probably a lot of examples of people saying it's just for the hell of it. It's just to find somebody. It's just because you want to beat people up. It's to justify your salary. That kind of conversation. It's important that people recognise why fish movement is important, and restrictions on fish movement and permits and CFAS registration is important. And when you talk about invasive non-native species, and I think a lot of people fail to realise or recognise how damaging a non-native species can be to a water that it's not supposed to be in, and how damaging disease can be to waters that they're not supposed to be in, and non-native plants. It's not just animals but plants as well. Really controversial one, and thankfully it's not something we have to tackle very often in our area, is Zander. Zander is obviously always quite a kind of controversial topic. Now, there's a real kind of 50-50 around the country, and I'm not going to platform this because it will just be a disagreement, but there's a 50-50 divide, because you've got half the country who have got very low stocked, very large Zander waters, and they're catching these big old Zander, double figures, anywhere up to 16, even 18 pounds, celebrating these specimen fish and thinking, well, how can anyone have a problem with this, because they're very low stocked? But then you've got the other half of the country, and a great majority of the canal network especially, where there are millions of them, like rats. They're literally tiny little, less than a pound, millions of Zander, and they breed like you wouldn't believe. They wipe out every other life form in the river. They eat all of the food, and Angler A over here with his 18-pounder can't understand what's wrong with the zander. The angler B over here is going, we need to remove these zander. So, that's... and when you're talking about illegal movement, it's, either en masse as a business or individually. Anglers move it because they think it'd be great to have zander over. I like zander fishing, so I'll just nick a zander and go shove it in my bit of river. So they'll breed. Hopefully they'll breed. And this is without kind of having too much of an opinion on it, because I'm always very evidence-based rather than opinion. I know there are areas of the country where zander are ruining fishing, where they are having a negative impact on not just fishing, but fisheries, the welfare of fish. But that's obviously a key part of it, Jamie, isn't it? Is there's got to be someone that's responsible for the facts and not the feelings, which I think you could probably agree with.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to split that down again, you can have still waters with non-native species in, but they've got to be on the permit and they've got to be agreed by the fisheries technical officer that fishery meets everything which allows it to be on the permit. So it's not going to be online. It's not going to be a floodplain issue, so that if it does flood, it's going to get out into the wider area. It is solely going to be kept in that still water. So zander in still waters, providing it's all been checked and it is permitted, it is how the fishery wants to run. It's when it's out in the sort of wider stretches of the rivers, the canals, the drains that we've got, and like you said, where they can cause problems. And I know CRT, Canal Rivers Trust, get a lot of flack for electrofishing the zander out of the canals. Like you said, at the end of the day, it is down on the keeping and the introduction of fish, but zander cannot be in there. If they haven't got them on their permit, they have to legally be removing them. And to get that put on the permit, I can't see it happening because it's connected to the wider river system. And from what this is from what I've heard, we don't really have any canals over here, so we can't comment. But speaking to seeing comments from the older guys who used to fish on the canals, will say it used to be full of gudgeon. Now zander here, there's hardly any gudgeon. You hardly pull any out. So yeah, what you're saying there marries up with what I've read online. And like you said, just having a non-native invasive species in a river system can really, really damage it. I mean,
it's a hot topic. The zander one's really fiery. It's a really fiery example, the zander one. But another good example, and it's a little bit probably more approachable, is carp. Everyone thinks that carp will save every fishery. If every problem if you want to be busier, put carp in. If you want to solve the problems on the river, put carp in. And I think one thing most anglers don't understand is that carp are one of the most destructive species you could possibly introduce to a fishery. They're great for carp fisheries. They're a lovely species, but en masse, carp destroy environments. They eat every resource. They breed out other fish. They take up most of the biomass of an environment. The answer is not carp. And obviously, you've probably seen, Jamie, and this will be part of your role as it moves into this fish movement thing. It's very easy to chuck carp in somewhere. You chuck it, whether it's koi out your pond or, whatever it might well be. People chuck carp in very innocently, thinking it will make fishing great, but to an extent, it could destroy a fishery very quickly within a few years.
Yeah, it could do, and obviously, like you said, they breed. So once they start to get overstocked, it starts to affect the biomass of the lake. It starts to affect water quality. Like you said, it outcompetes, and you've got the other aspect of what we look out for under KIF, which is the disease side. So carp herpesvirus, KHV. That's when the fish health inspector gets involved and closes the fishery down temporarily and doesn't let anything on or off it. So yeah, we can advise on fisheries management and we can implement certain stuff under KIF, keeping an introduction fish, but it is down to the fisheries to sort of manage and have a good management system in place. And again, that's what technical officers are there to advise on.
And they're free. I'm not saying that either an enforcement officer or a technical officer can come at the drop of a hat. But as a rod license paying angler, and the same with the Angling Trust, as a member of the Angling Trust and a rod license paying club or angler, you can ring your local technical officers. You can ring your local Angling Trust Fishery Support Service officer, and they will visit you and give you advice for free. because it is for the benefit of fish and fisheries for them to do so. So please use the resources. Hopefully everyone will kind of take note and use the resources. But a lot of what I think is important, and I hope our podcast is a part of this, is that the devil's in the detail. There's a lot more detail than those surface feelings. And like I say, it's more important that facts are more important than feelings. When you talk about KHV, for example, disease, I don't think a lot of anglers realise that a lot of fisheries are carrying KHV already. A huge percentage of fisheries have already got dormant KHV. And everyone thinks the answer to better fishing is to just put more fish in. If you've got a carp fishery where the fishing's a bit slow, they say, I'll spend another 10 grand on fish. Now, if you're increasing the biomass beyond the availability of resource, beyond the availability of food, you're increasing the stress levels. If you start increasing the stresses in those fish, that dormant KHV becomes active. And when people say, such and such lake's got KHV, such and such lake probably always had KHV. It's a dormant herpes virus, as it is in all aspects of herpes kind of thing. It's a dormant herpes virus. And not in every case, but in most cases, not just KHV, but other diseases were probably already present, but due to the kind of relaxed levels of stresses in those animals, was never active. And just chucking in a few more fish, and I see it every year, a lake that's just done a stocking, 6 weeks later, KHV. 6 weeks later, the fish are all dead. And you thought you were going to actually improve the fishing with a few more fish, and what you've actually done is destroy your fishing. So, there's a lot more kind of deeper conversation than just the really obvious solutions that sometimes, fisheries come up with.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's no silver bullet, and like you say, stocking a fish brings out the stress in it. You normally find as well, it's a number of factors. So, hot weather, low DO, dissolved oxygen levels, algae blooms, predation, anything like that, which all combines to bring out the disease. But again, that's what our fisheries tech guys are there to sort of advise and give a hand on.
Yeah, one of the key messages from this podcast, and the reason we wanted to speak to not just the agency, but you yourself, who you're so good at kind of putting this across, the resources are there for you. You're paying for those resources with your rod license money. When people say, where does my rod license money go? It's waiting for you on the end of the phone. It's waiting for you to ring up and ask for the best advice. So, given an interesting point, actually, obviously you've got a lot of knowledge about that side of things, and as you said, the agency's kind of moving more into this kind of fish movement enforcement, and looking more into fish movement and all that kind of thing. Have you got qualifications in it, or is the agency offering training and extra qualification in that? Is it something that's interesting to you? Is it, how about that side of things?
So there is a course you can do with the Fisheries Institute Management, I think it's called, or Fisheries Management Institution.
IFM, the Institute of Fisheries Management.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. So as you can tell, I've not taken it. But no, that's offered to the
Don't worry, Paul, I've got
technical officers. Yeah, so the technical officers have taken, I know one of them has taken that. And there are various training courses we can do. The IFM hold various seminars which we can go on to sort of bring us up to speed. But like I said, in terms of for myself, I did look at it a couple of years ago when I wasn't in this role doing something else within fisheries. I couldn't apply for it because, like I mentioned, I was on temporary contracts, so it was only for permanent staff. But doing this role, there's so much that I need to get my head around with enforcement and training. I've kind of taken a step back and gone, that's a technical side. So we let the technical officers sort of deal with that. Obviously, I've got a bit of a background in it and can advise so far, but I'd call in my colleagues to sort of get the finer details and fisheries management side of things for that.
It's another good point, Jamie. Like, signposting is a really important part of your job, and also a really important part with the Angling Trust as well. There's always this expectation that you can answer every question. Name me a profession where one person has got all the knowledge. Not possible. It's not possible. So a lot of what the service is that you're a front-facing voice for the Environment Agency, but you can signpost people. If someone asks you on the bank about invasive species or whatever else, you can signpost them to the technical guys that have got more knowledge on water quality or invasive species. You can signpost them to the Angling Trust. The Angling Trust can signpost them to you guys. There's a lot of information out there, and I think one of the frustrations for me is if you really are passionate you can learn an awful lot. And the IFM are great for that. The Institute of Fisheries Management, they're actually a partner of ours as well. And you can actually get an exclusive discount, guys, on the IFM diploma course, which is their entry-level course into fishery management, which is, I think, anyone should take. But also, if you are a member on Clubmate, you can get a discount on taking that course. And it's so valuable, especially if you're a volunteer fishery manager. And by that, we mean like a committee member, if you're a head bailiff, if you're a kind of doing fishery work for a club. If you're a volunteer that's really passionate about maybe being a better volunteer, advancing in a club or becoming a professional, a paid professional in fisheries, thoroughly recommend looking at the IFM to take some of those entry level courses. I think it's well worth it. But coming back to you, Jamie, I think we're going to round up shortly. Let's just have a quick overview from you. If you could give us, just to close out today's today's podcast, give us a quick thing from you. What are a few things that you would say to anglers? Give us a few things you'd like to say to anglers to make your job better, to improve fisheries enforcement, and tell us a couple of things you're looking forward to, what you want to see in 2026.
Okay, so what I'd say is to anglers, can't stress how important it is to report stuff. If you see something illegal going on fisheries wise, get it reported on the 0800 80 70 60 number, which is our incident hotline. And like I said before, there is now an online portal you can use. Just type in report illegal fishing in England, and it will come up with the .gov.uk website, same website where you buy your license from. Going on to licenses, I know a lot of people won't. Obviously, it's my job to know this. Bylaws, just when you buy your license, there's links on there. Just click on the link and just have a general overview of the bylaws, because that could save you getting a ticket, getting an offence ticket for something which you might not seem important or major, but it is within the bylaws. So just have a quick look through, educate yourself. You'll be surprised what's on there and what you might not know. And yeah, if you see us out on the bank, say hello. I'm going to come over and say hello and probably have a chat and see how you're doing with your fishing and seeing if you blanked or not. But yeah, we're not all, we're not out to stop people fishing. We're just out to make sure people fish illegally. Not illegally. Don't want to be saying that, do I? No, we're out to make sure people fish legally, and to encourage people to get out on the bank as well. Because, like I said, we're intelligence-led, so you're our eyes and ears. We can only be in so many places at once, and as you can gather, we've got a big area to cover in a small team. So, intelligence-led. If we get certain reports in from a certain area, we'll concentrate our patrols in that area and see if we can get anything out of it. For me, I'm looking forward to next year. Hopefully, I've got my boating qualifications now, so it won't just be on the river. We can potentially get out into the estuaries and do that side of things with the eel netsman potentially. That's just being out and about. Like I say, we've got a lot of case files coming up, getting our heads around that and just getting on top of the patch and being seen out and about, because that's a lot of it is, and I understand a lot of anglers won't see us out and about. Like I said, we're a small team, big areas to cover. The more we can get out and about, I'm coming across anglers that I know kind of regular now, that I can walk up and go, oh, yeah, that's so and so. I checked his license 2 weeks ago. I'll have a chat with him and off I go.
Well, I think that sums it up, Jamie. I think really importantly, and whether it's a fisheries enforcement officer or water bailiff as warranted as you are, or a club bailiff, I think the important message always is a bailiff is there to get you fishing, not to stop you fishing. And I think we've probably covered that today and given people a bit of an insight into what that means. Thank you very much for joining us today. I found it really fascinating. Hopefully it's some great information for our audience. I really appreciate getting to know you. It's also really nice to put a human face to fisheries enforcement and hopefully to educate the audience. And I think we can probably get that online reporting feature in Clubmate, but we'll have a few conversations about that. Thanks for joining us, Jamie, and thanks everyone for joining us for yet another episode. We will see you next time.
Yep. Cheers. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for listening. Join us next time for another episode of the Casting Forward podcast, brought to you by Clubmate. And if you haven't already, click the subscribe button now and follow us for more.